Good afternoon and welcome to the second parallel session dedicated to Hungary in the Balkans, crafting the southern illiberal flank. What the last decade or so meant for democracy in Hungary? What are Budapest's positions, ambitions and goals in the European Union and in the Western Balkans? And how influential are Hungary's illiberal political views? These are the topics and questions, and the answers will be sought by Ferenc Németh, Research Fellow on Hungarian Institute of International Affairs, István Szent-Iványi, Senior Fellow of Department of International Relations and History on Kodolányi János University, Adnan Ćerimagić, Senior Analyst on European Stability Initiative, and Srđan Cvijić, President of the BCSP International Advisory Committee. Moderator is Katerina Sinadinovska, journalist and co-founder of Balkan Center for Constructive Policies, Solucija. Please take the floor.
Thank you. Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from me also. Dobar dan, jó napot. We are here in the times when everybody is focused on the Russian or Chinese influence in the region. We are here to talk about Hungarian influence. And I think that is very important, not only because we rarely discuss about this, but also about the level of how this influence is present in the region. I'm coming from North Macedonia, as you probably know, and I'm a journalist, so I can assure you that there is an influence, Hungarian influence, especially in the field of media, in many, many ways. But we're going to talk about other official and not official ways of how official Budapest is creating political realities or influencing on the political realities on the Balkans. Here with me, I have my distinguished panelists. And without further ado, we're going to start because we're already late and we want to also have space for your questions afterwards. We're going to talk about, as the panel said, we're going to talk about Hungarian influence in the Balkans, but also on how many ways actually the Hungary is influencing in the Balkans. So maybe we can start about the vision of Hungarian state for the Balkans and how do you think that its presence in the region?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, I have to put forward a disclaimer. I am very critical on the Hungarian foreign policy, and therefore you should take note. And what I'm saying, it's a critical review on the Hungarian foreign policy, including the Balkan policy. But I have to state some basic principles which are commonly shared by everyone in Hungary, I suppose. The first and most important thing that Hungary does have a vital, essential interest in enlargement of EU and especially enlargement for Western Balkans and especially for Serbia. It's one of the pivotal states in the region. That's for sure. The second point is that there is a general consensus in the political landscape. There are very few things in Hungary which is generally agreed and shared, but in that issue there is no dispute. It's important for Hungary. Even I wrote a book on the Hungarian foreign policy. I can show you here, and it's one chapter on the enlargement of the Western Balkans and so on. And it's very positive and supportive. And the third one, which is also very important, that there is a popular support in Hungary, an overall public opinion support for enlargement. According to the latest poll, much above 60% are in favor of enlargement. That's the positive side of the things.
And not the case in other European states.
No, exactly.
It's very important.
Many other European states, you can experience a sort of fatigue, enlargement fatigue. They wouldn't like to support and wouldn't like to enlarge that. That's the positive side of the Hungarian Balkan policy, and it's very sound and very healthy fundament. But the Hungarian foreign policy went wrong with Western Balkans. and why, and that's an important issue now. I think that's my explanation, and I'm sure that my colleagues will criticize or correct it, but my position is that unfortunately has been subordinated to the personal ambition of the Prime Minister. The Hungarian Prime Minister is an ambitious politician, as you know that. He would like to be a regional leader. It's very important for him that it should be accepted in the region. And the second one, that there is a political agenda behind it. The political agenda has been revealed by him. A few years ago, he said Hungary should play an important role in the region as a middle power and one of the major advocates of the whole issue. And therefore, that's why so important for him. As you know, this Hungarian political elite and the leadership isolated now on the European scene. Not many allies there, and only a few allies there. And he desperately needs new partners, new allies, and he supposed that those countries could be and will be good partners in the case of the EU membership, and that's an investment in his political agenda. The second thing which is important for him, that he is looking for clients. Client politicians and client states. And client politicians may be the best model for that, Mr. Gruevski, if you look at you and it comes this name for me. He took refuge, as you know, in Budapest and enjoys hospitality, of Hungarian hospitality now and so on. But even to some extent, he considers Serbia as a client state. That's a good client, and also Dodik. He's also playing an important role in the Hungarian foreign policy. That could be later on some clients, some allies who can support the Hungarian foreign political agenda to become here a pivotal state in the whole region. What are the major instruments and tools? The major instrument is the EU membership for Hungary. That's practically Mr. Orbán using the EU membership as an exchangeable commodity to put on sale his veto right, he's put on sale his influence to help and promote the countries and so on. For instance, last time that he openly and publicly said that he will veto any kind of sanction against Mr. Dodik. Of course, it didn't cause any pleasure in Brussels and in the capitals, European capitals, and so on. That means that he's using that instruments, and the whole European Union membership is used instrumental for the foreign policy. And what's the problem with that? As you know, previously, I was in the 90s one of the architect of the Hungarian foreign policy and the neighborhood policy, and at that time we made clear that we are not selective on that. We are in favor of enlargement, but set conditions, and they are important. And what's the major difference now? That Mr. Orbán is supporting the candidate countries unconditional. He teaming up with the bad guys of the region, and he promised them, I support you without fulfilling any criteria, meeting any criteria, especially not the rule of law criteria or the democratic niceties and human rights. He doesn't respect so much those things. He literally said a few months ago that the rule of law is a Western blah blah. It's literally sad. So it's nothing. He doesn't like rule of law. He likes rule over the law, and that's his policy. That's it. That's in a nutshell. Of course, I can talk about this much longer, but I have many well-educated colleagues, and they can complement. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is very important messages that you share, because we on the Western Balkans, when we think and talk about European integration process, we mainly think about rule of law. We want to change our countries in terms of be more or less the same with the European countries and values and European members who were members decades ago. So if we have in the very heart of Europe, in the center of Europe, a leader who is misusing, as you said, using the EU membership as the way to satisfy its clients, then we apparently have a problem. Do you agree, István, on this?
Ferenc.
Ferenc,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's okay. But thank you so much for giving me the floor. From the first intervention of István, it seems, or it might seem, that Hungary's interest in the Western Balkans only came after or as a result of Orbán's premiership in 2010, which is, in my opinion, it's not the case. It pretty much predates Orbán's rule. Our interest in the Western Balkans, as well as our interest for the region's EU integration process. It started in the 90s. We were firm supporters of the Western Balkan stabilization after the war, as well as the EU enlargement path, or opening the possibility to have the Western Balkans incorporated in the EU. And answering your first, or let's say original question, Hungarian influence was the reason behind, let's say, this heavy emphasis on Hungary's role in the Balkans and influence in the Balkans. I always answer this question with another question. Where else if not in the Balkans? Given Hungary's history, interconnectedness with the region, the proximity with the region, especially with Serbia, as well as the Hungarian minority living in Serbia and in Croatia, it somehow comes natural that Hungary places that much emphasis on its southern neighborhood. And in addition to this, Hungary, as well as the Western Balkans, share a lot of problems and issues, or issues that the Western Balkans might face have a direct or indirect impact on Hungary as well. For example, the migration. This is an issue that Hungary cannot or should not deal with without the involvement of the Western Balkans. And those are the issues that got the forefront after 2010, after Orbán came to power again. But the main, I would say, the biggest driving force next to, let's say, the creation of political ties within the region, the biggest, let's say, incentive on building good relations with the countries is of economic nature, in my opinion. We can see a strong economic focus since 2010 coming from Hungary towards the Western Balkans, let it be outward for indirect investments or the rising presence of Hungarian companies in the region. Our oil refinery MOL or our biggest bank, the OTP, are fine example of this Hungarian economic expansion to the Western Balkans. So what is very important in this sense that there have been significant emphasis on the Western Balkans in Hungary's foreign policy before Orbán, but the quantity of it and let's say the visibility of it significantly grew in the last 10 years or so.
Thank you, Ferenc. I think we're going to focus on economical influence later on. Some of these ideas, like or things to focus on minority, migration, it's very legitimate, this debate, and legitimate interest of Hungary to be invested in. But it's different than building clients and clientelistic politicians around the region to ally with.
That's the point. I fully agree with you, what you said. It was a misunderstanding. I did not say that it has started with Orbán. Much earlier started that, even in 90. I start with the point of departure that it's a general agreement on Hungary. That's a vital interest due to the geographical proximity, due to the economic engagement, and due to the many reasons, ethnic Hungarians and so on. It's no problem for that. The policy which conducted by the Hungarian foreign policy, that's the problem now, which focusing very much on the bad guys of the region, teaming up with those who are not promoting the human rights and rule of law and so on, but and did not stand for the important values of the European values, which is the precondition of the membership. That's the serious problem. That's every time Prime Minister Orbán and Foreign Minister Szijjártó emphasizing that this should not mean anything else, that they should be there, even or now, and did not make any remark, any critical remark on the backsliding, which which is experiencing in this country where we are now, and some of the other countries, and even they are teaming up with Dodik, who is the major troublemaker of the whole region, and so on, and having a good relationship with Mr. Gruevski and so on. I think that's the problem. Not the problem that we are interested. That's natural. That's a basic interest of Hungary. But that would be the best not to make a selective politics and supporting and promoting only those who are now in an authoritarian rule and an authoritarian regime, but standing for the values and for those the civil society and for those people who are fighting for meeting the democratic criteria and democracy. That would be, in my view, that would be the task of the Hungarian foreign policy, because Hungary could play a very positive role in the Western Balkan, which is here, which has a leverage with economic investments and with many other things, but did not use for the best purposes. The best purpose would be to promote the European values and the Europeanization of the whole region, and that could be a real engine of the whole integration process. And that's it, which did not work now.
Srđan, how do you see this political influence? Because Serbia is the closest here, your neighbors. And do you maybe see the reflection of this political influence in the field of economy as well?
Yeah, both. I mean, maybe talking about Serbia, and both István and Ferenc mentioned it. Serbia is Hungary's, I think, most important partner in the region economically, also because of its minority. And whereas István talked about enlargement, I will talk about the bilateral issues on that side. And maybe three things are important to point out. And we didn't know, one is reconciliation, because it did happen at some level. The other thing is depopulation, and the other thing is assimilation. When you talk about Hungarian minority in Vajdaság, in Vojvodina. So basically, I will tell you an anecdote. When Fidesz was in the opposition, and you, István, were an MEP in the European Parliament, so it was in 2005. I was at the time working for the Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe, advising late Erhard Busek. And in that capacity, I was following the European Parliament. And I don't know if anybody ever saw this in any other circumstance, but at that time it was unique. There was a live streaming of the AFET committee meeting in 2005 on the ethnic tensions in Vojvodina. And this streaming was very much pushed by Fidesz MEPs who wanted to appear on their national television that was transmitting this. And why? Because there were elections in 2006. So that was then. Now, the interesting thing about that, there were ethnic tensions in Vojvodina, although, you know, we can debate about their nature, but they were. But the thing is, they ended by the end of 2004. So in 2004, it was like a bit of a late reaction. So we have that Fidesz, and we have Fidesz now that is in great relations with Serbia. So on the one hand, the relations are good. On the other hand, what everybody on the ground in Vojvodina would tell you, that this is, they do not refer it as a historical reconciliation. They refer it as a salon reconciliation between Viktor Orban and Alexander Vučić and people around there. And it is a fact that if you look at it, and I will speed up a bit because there is this depopulation element. In 2010, everybody knows, Hungary enacted the citizenship law. As a result of this law, we do not know exactly the exact number because we couldn't get this information. We could get other from the Freedom of Information requests that we submitted for the Balkan Čardaš report that BCSP published this year. Adi was greatly helping on that as well. We know that more than 100,000 Serbian citizens got Hungarian nationality. Between 10 and 15% of these are not even ethnic Hungarians, because this was the second or third iteration of that law that couldn't be based ethnically. So Serbs who could prove ancestry prior to 1920 in Austro-Hungarian Empire could apply for this citizenship. I know a guy who absolutely is not Hungarian, just learned Hungarian to get the EU citizenship. So basically, but what did this provoke? What did this provoke? In a municipality, and we have facts and anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence, municipality of Kanjiža used to be Magyar Kanjiža as well. Well, it's no longer Magyar Kanjiža really, because they lost 40% of the population as a result of that. According to the 2022 census, there were 184,000 approximately Hungarians living in Vojvodina, and in 2011, 253,000. So that's a drop of almost 30%. When you compare this to the general depopulation of Serbia, like all other Eastern European countries, Serbia is losing population, but it's about a little bit less than 7%. So it's much higher. And where did these people go? To the EU and so on and so on. I mean, I can talk about other issues as well, but maybe leave some space.
Thank you. Yes, I think this was a very important point also, because it's really affecting the life of ordinary people living in Vojvodina. Ado, how is the situation in Bosnia? What are the official ties between official Sarajevo and Budapest? Can we expect maybe Mr. Dodik to follow the step of Gruevski sometimes in the future?
I will leave that without a comment. No, if Hungarian policy in the Western Balkans predates 2010. I'll use this one. So if the relationship between Hungary and the Western Balkans predates 2010, relationship between Viktor Orban and Hungary and Milorad Dodik are actually very recent. People think that because Milorad Dodik has been here forever, and Viktor Orban as well, that they have been buddies for quite some time. But the fact is that as long as Viktor Orban was quite close to EPP party, European People's Party, in fact, Hungary and Viktor Orban were supporting EPP sister parties, not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also in Republika Srpska. And you can see very clear shift from Orban towards Dodik, which happened after general elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2018. So up until 2018, you could see Hungarian government and Prime Minister Orban, but also foreign ministers, really being engaged in supporting Igor Crnadak, PDP party. This is the sisters EPP party. And the shift happens in late 2018, early 2019, when they've actually developed not just personal ties, but also ties between businesses, between government. And you could see a very clear preference of the government in Budapest to build its relationship in Bosnia and Herzegovina via Banja Luka. How they've explained this interest in Republika Srpska in particular, but also in Milorad Dodik, as part of their policy, which is we need stability in the region. They would very often argue, if you look at the statements by the foreign minister and the prime minister, that, you know, if you want stable Bosnia and Herzegovina, you need to talk to everyone. Milorad Dodik has a potential to destabilize the country and the region, so we need to talk to him, we need to take into account his interests, etc., etc. That was, I would say, the camouflage of the policy towards Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then behind this camouflage, there was also obviously some interest that correlates when it comes to probably businesses, but also when it comes to ideological interests. Milorad Dodik has pursued inside Bosnia and Herzegovina a copy-paste of Hungarian migration policy inside the EU. Hungary has offered itself as a protection for Milorad Dodik when it comes to the EU sanctions. And that's where we see then another important qualitative shift in the relationship between Orban and Dodik and Orban towards Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that is late 2021 when German foreign ministry and the government pursued very strongly advocacy for sanctions against Milorad Dodik because of his actions inside Bosnia and Herzegovina, basically a collapse of institutional and constitutional architecture of the country. And there you can see that Hungary presented itself as a protector of Milorad Dodik personally. And then slowly, 1.5 years later, we can see quite clear evidences that actually not just Prime Minister Orban, but also Hungary plays a sort of a middleman between Milorad Dodik and the rest of Europe. So Milorad Dodik has managed, because of his own policies and actions, to actually self-isolate himself. So he's not talking to the US, he's not talking to the UK, he's not talking to much of the EU. I think after the last visit by Special Representative Manuel Srđan, I don't think he will talk to Germany more. He has basically left only Orban Budapest and Orban's Commissioner for EU Enlargement as people who have basically access to him. So in some extent, he's also being, I would say, used by Hungary, by Budapest, to present itself in its relations towards the EU. For example, Foreign Minister was in Banja Luka recently. He tweeted very clearly, or the government tweeted very clearly, that one of the reasons of his visit was to push for the agreements within the Berlin process to be ratified by Bosnia and Herzegovina, where Milorad Dodik was blocking them. A couple of months later, we see that the Foreign Minister of Hungary was in Tirana, and that Hungary is now kind of invited to be part of the Berlin process, which for years was something that Berlin was not open to have. And we see many other examples. Hungary is taking over EU for Command at the time when both the EU and Brussels need the support from Russia inside the UN Security Council. And we see that basically Hungary is increasing its presence inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But this actions actually, while being under the pretext that they want stability, that they think they need to talk, actually is damaging not just Bosnia and Herzegovina, not just the region, but also EU's interest and NATO's interests in the region, because the model that Viktor Orban and his government present for the region, present for Bosnia and Herzegovina and for Milorad Dodik, at the moment when EU is, let's say, catching ground, saying enlargement is back, EU is back, let's stabilize the region, let's work on this. He's actually presenting a completely different model and offering for the leaders in the region, including the leader in Republika Srpska, that, you know, the survival of the kind of politics that they are doing is possible. Also, he legitimizes to some extent some of the very, very terrible narratives that come from Milorad Dodik inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I would say with that endangering basically the stability of the country. Recently, or I would say even a year ago, Milorad Dodik was invited to Budapest. He took part in a conference where we had the former vice president of the US, where we had 4 prime ministers at that time from the EU, and the major message from that meeting was his speech there, Dodik's speech there, in which was transmitted live on the public TV in Banja Luka and was quite widely shared in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I will just read a short quote from that speech, which was on the stage in Budapest, so that you understand what I mean by legitimizing some of the narratives. Dodik said, "You did not understand what happened in Yugoslavia back in 1990s. We only defended our families, our values, and our way of life. But you decided to take the other side and demonize us Serbs, us Christians. We are Christians, and our experience of living with Muslims is a lesson for the rest of Europe. And let me share that lesson with you. Muslims don't change. Muslims don't abandon their values. Unless you defend your values and protect your population, you lose." So this is the message that went back to Bosnia, legitimized not just by Budapest, but also by 4 other prime ministers, former vice president of the US, and it gave somehow not just the visual, but also very emotional effect inside the country.
Thank you, Adi, for these very important messages. And all this in the name of so-called stability. It's a very old and dangerous dilemma that should we pick between democracy or stability? And I think that this is something that it's not a question even. But you mentioned something that I think is important, and that is that all these dangerous narratives and tendencies are coming and supported from within the EU. And having in mind the situation the countries in the Western Balkans are, in terms of rule of law, for us it's not blah blah, for us we're fighting for really for justice and for good governance. What all this situation says about European Union and the situation, the crisis that Europe faces now?
It caused some anger in Europe. You can see that even the Hungarian Balkan policy, but much more the internal situation in Hungary. We are not focusing on that. I'm not going into details, but there are some new instruments which has been prompted or triggered by Hungarian and by Polish case. That's it. And it has a spillover effect. One of the leading Dutch politicians told me, not now, it's two or 3 years ago, but even now it's relevant. I asked him, that's why are you not supporting the enlargement of Western Balkans? And he literally said, we wouldn't like to have one more Poland than Hungary. That's it. That's as many.
Many Orbans around.
Yes, unfortunately said Poland and Hungary. I think Poland is not Kaczynski, and Hungary is not Orban, but many identify the country with Prime Minister Orban, and he thinks that his regime is the country. That's very unjust and unfair, but that's the case. And therefore, and as you know, that just now Schallenberg initiated in June Friends of Western Balkans, composed a new platform supporting and pressuring the EU enlargement, composed by Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Croatia, and Hungary is left out. Left out for obvious reasons, because wouldn't like to demonstrate that Hungary is a model. It's not a model. Unfortunately, the whole situation can question the transformative power of the European Union. Because in our case, it's very clear that there is a backsliding, and also the Polish case and some other countries, they have some problems with that after the enlargement can be some backsliding and retreat from the democratic criteria, and some of the candidate countries even before they perform in the same way. And of course there is some concerns on the Western European countries, and they wouldn't like to have new countries, new candidate countries or the new member states who are similar to those who breaching the values and rules of the European Union. And therefore it's not very advantageous for those countries now to closely teaming up with the Hungarian regime, because the Hungarian regime now is not in the position to really successfully help. Now, unfortunately, I'm very unfortunate to say that. It's of course everyone would like to praise their own country and would like to be proud of the country, and I am proud of my country in many different aspects, but not the foreign policy.
Ferenc, you mentioned economy and economical interest. Do you think that these political trends are affecting economical relations, and also maybe investments, maybe behind all these business interests, are there political ideas, or it's pure business when it comes to business?
Well, basically, when it comes to Hungarian investments towards the Western Balkans, it's basically about pure business plus politics or good political relations. So I don't
a combination.
A combination, exactly. So I don't think there is, let's say, how Hungary operates within the EU or outside of it have an impact, a direct impact on the appetite of the Western Balkan states when it comes to accepting financial assistance coming from Hungary or welcoming foreign direct investment coming to the Western Balkans from Hungary. What is very interesting during this debate is that I also like to look at the picture from the other perspective, is that why is there an appetite for, let's say, for Orbán's vision and an Orbán kind of rule in the Western Balkan countries and also within the Balkan societies? Because wherever I go to Belgrade, wherever I go to a hairdresser in Belgrade, and I mention that I'm from Hungary, people always say that Orbán is a great leader, he's a strong leader, he can be our role model as well. I haven't really seen any Balkan politicians, not only from Serbia, but from the region as well, with the exception of Sarajevo, who would openly criticize Orbán's politics in the Western Balkans. So from what I get from these impressions, and this is purely, like personal impressions, is that there is an appetite for this vision, for Orbán's vision, and how he conducts himself in the EU, or at least the Western Balkan leaders don't want confrontations with another leader from the EU who is so much supportive of EU enlargement.
Weak democracies are, by definition, solid soil to spread this type of governing.
And just to finish this thought is that I haven't really encountered any complaint coming from a Western Balkan country with regards to, let's say, the rule of law situation in Hungary.
So, Srđan, basically it's only us in the NGO sector who are complaining, and maybe some journalists, but the politicians are apparently supporting this type of rule.
Supporting or enabling? I don't know which one. Or
at least they're quiet. Openly.
Exactly.
That's kind of quite understandable. On the one hand, it tells you a lot about the state of democracy and leadership in our region as well, But besides that, to be a bit serious, it's a bit difficult to criticize the guy, even if you come from opposition parties, who pays ads in all major EU member state newspapers to promote Serbia's EU membership, So that's a difficult position to be at. So at the end of the day, it's up to us from the civil society to do it, But on the economic front, though, you asked Ferenc whether it's political purely, or there is a lot of really purely business interests. I mean, the bank, the OTP, or MOL, you can mention many companies that are present in the region even prior to, as you were saying, István, to Orbán's coming back to power. But they're interesting is they're investigative journalists from Serbia and Hungary worked a lot about the business ties around, Orbán's entourage, his son-in-law, and Serbian Prime Minister. But I don't want to go into that. You have everything on Cin's website to read. What is interesting is the energy sector. And there comes that Russian link, And
nuclear.
Well, there is the nuclear. There is Paksh 2, where basically Rosatom has a deal with Hungarian government to build the extension of the nuclear power plant in Hungary. I think the construction should start in 2024, although now we hear some signs that it may finally not be Russians, but maybe the French, which would be definitely infinitely better for Hungary. But while we were in this Russian scenario, what was very interesting is that our president at one point voiced the interest of Serbia to take part in this nuclear project as a minority shareholder. 10%, correct, István, yes. And that was really interesting because on the one hand, you know, that extension would produce 2,400 megawatts. So it's a lot, you know, it's a lot. And Hungary, when you have in mind that Hungary is normally heated on gas, which means that at nighttime, especially in winter, Hungary has these electricity production peaks, and you don't know what to do with that electricity. You cannot store electricity. You have to sell it. So there is totally economic viability for Serbia, but what? To buy this electricity. Why take part in such an expensive extension project as a minority shareholder? And now there are different theories. You know, we spoke in our research. I don't see my colleague Ivan Ranković, who worked a lot on this. We spoke a lot with people in Budapest, experts about this. And one scenario could be that what we heard recently, that Hungarian business interests may be interested in the privatization of EPS in Serbia. Maybe something to do with that. Some, you know, I don't know, maybe Ferenc, you have an opinion on that. The other theory was that, you know, Rosatom, to build PAX-2, needs Western technology. How to get Western technology when you have sanctions? Serbia doesn't have sanctions. This is just a scenario. Serbia imports Western technology for the nuclear power plant, and then PAX gets built without sanctions, for example.
Ferenc, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, just a short.
Can we guess?
Just a short comment, because I was very taken aback last year when Serbia announced its interest over the PAX-2, but this plan, as far as I know, fizzled out. I mean, nobody is talking about Serbia's involvement anymore. So I think that was, honestly, I don't know, maybe it was just something happened in President Vučić made him say that. I have no idea. I mean, as far as I know now, they are planning, as you rightfully mentioned, involving French technology rather than, you know, having the entire nuclear plant built by the French.
Yes. Although Mészáros gets to build it, right?
Exactly. István, you want to
a short
continue?
comment. As it comes to the OTP and MOL, that's a different story in my view. As you notice, these are the so-called regional champions, even before the Orban government they have been. And they have got a large plan to expand, and where they can expand. It's a natural expansion area is Western Balkans, independently from Mr. Orban and from even they were present here much before, and also in Romania, in Croatia, in Slovenia, and many other places in Western Balkan. Slovenia is not part of that, but there's many other places have been. That was the same with the telcos and others. I do not mistake this with those investments which do have some political elements and components. For instance, now there is a Serb-Hungary gas company. That's political thing. Also the hydroelectric plants. However, I don't know how is it now. I suppose that there is some opposition on behalf of Serbia.
Serbian Družba for oil as well.
Družba. Now that's a very interesting story, because Ukraine has announced that by the end of next year they will cancel the transit contract with Russia. Therefore, Družba, the friendship pipeline, won't work anymore. Only 1.5 years and then finish. When Ukraine keeps its promises, then it doesn't work anymore. It's also a serious problem for us, frankly speaking. Unfortunately, Hungary, that's not only the problem of the Orban government, but even the previous governments, very much dependent on Russian energy and did not make any strong efforts to deviate and diversify the energy sources. Now there are some efforts, but in the last 20 years, almost nothing. It's completely dependent on that, and now we pay a very high price for that, because now we don't have really infrastructure to get anything else. Now it's building out in different sources. Therefore, Hungary is not able to provide. And you mentioned the PAX. Of course, if you look at the present day consumption, PAX will produce a big superfluous energy. But maybe you know that Hungary started now a huge plan to build battery factories. The batteries, which mostly Chinese.
We know very well.
You know very well. And it has a real demand on electricity, and most probably there won't be any surplus, even in that case. If they all planned battery factories will work, they will consume all production in Hungary. That's in 10 years. According to the plan, it's 2030 will be functional, the power plant.
Thank you. Ada, also we want to know about the situation in Bosnia. Are there some economical investments from Hungary, and what is the business model of official Budapest there?
Well, I wanted just briefly to go back to what Ferenc said. I think the reason also why many politicians in the region do not object Orban publicly is also because what we have seen in the past, I would say five-ish years, is the rise of influence, of political influence of Orban and Hungarian government in the region. And I would argue that as Orban found himself under increasing pressure inside the EU, he started to move towards the Western Balkans. In 2019, it was actually in March that EPP, European People's Party, suspended Fidesz from the party. And then it came back to be paid back on the Western Balkans, because it was in 2019, in September, October, that Hungary got the enlargement commissioner, something that in 2014, because Fidesz was not that important at that point, was unthinkable, and the explanations were we can't have a neighboring country of an enlargement country to have enlargement portfolio, etc. He got it in 2019. As we see, for example, now with the financial framework and the suspension or demands for the reforms, etc., we also see that as a result or as a by-effect or how you can call it, we see the increase of power, political power in the region. EU formation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the fact that he's only one communicating with some of the actors in the region. So I would say that the politicians in the region recognize the rise of power, except for those whose policies that are promoted with Viktor Orban actually become then, I would say, a sort of victims of his policies, which happened in case of many Bosniaks, but not all Bosniak politicians, that they perceive his policies as a danger, because he's not only giving a platform for Milorad Dodik, but he's also strengthening him at the EU level, but also inside the country. When it comes to the economic, it goes, for example, via Croatia, via INA oil company. I mean, almost the entire market, 80% of the market in the federation is actually in the Hungarian hands. And if you think of this vital infrastructure, actually for the Bosniak politicians, it would make sense to be in good relations with Orban and with Budapest, if economy is ever then used as a political mean. But at the same time, I would say recently we've seen that, for example, Germany has introduced bilateral sanctions towards Bosnia and Herzegovina. They've cut 4 projects, 4 investments, economic investments in Republika Srpska as a result of Milorad Dodik's policies. And we've seen that there was an agreement between Orban and Dodik that it's government of Hungary who's going to take over these 4 projects and finance what the Germans have not financed. And he has, again, let's say, strengthened not just inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also at the international level, that Dodik says we're even more happier to have Hungarian investments because it's easier to do business with them than with a complicated German system. Which comes back again to my point of biting us by the tail. It's obvious that Berlin, Paris, Brussels do not have time to deal with simultaneously several crises. It's obvious that Dodik's actions since 2019 were deliberately in the direction to self-isolate himself from all the actors, US, UK, Berlin, Paris, and others. And he has given himself into the hands of Budapest, and by that has strengthened Budapest, and that has led us now in this position where, you know, when we should see EU actually having a proactive and constructive and good policy towards the region, at the times we have difficulties also because of the role that Budapest has. So I would say Berlin, Brussels, Paris bought into Dodik's policy, and the result is that it is. So the economic interests, they exist from predate, let's say, Orban time, but there are also now these new types of, you know, we will compensate for whatever other liberal actors try to punish.
It's a combination, we would say. It's a combination. I will open the floor for questions now. Can you please just... Oh, yes, we can start from here. Can you tell us your name?
Good afternoon. I'm Gregor Meyer, the regional correspondent for the German press agency DPA, also responsible for Hungary. First, the impression about the popularity of Mr. Orban in Serbia. As a foreigner living here, I can confirm that. But it's not because of Mr. Orban's big vision, it's just because he is anti-Western, and a large part of the Serbian population is anti-Western, and they feel the same. And even to say that perhaps you will find here fervent nationalists who don't like much Vučić, but they would also say Orban is great. And the most popular politician in Serbia is Vladimir Putin. That should make us think.
Yes, it is a remark, it's not a question, but because Ferenc said something about how attractive this Orban governing is here on the Balkans, maybe it's not only anti-Western things that we are promoting, but also this strongman, the leader that we need someone to deal with our problems, that we are not capable to do it by ourselves as the citizens, which is it's a defeat for democracy in the substance.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a survey conducted by a Serbian NGO, and basically it found out that the #1 foreign politician in Serbia at that time was Putin. I guess that is kind of the same now. And the third one on the list was Orban, actually. I think the second one was the Chinese leader. Really? Yeah. So but that was very surprising, and maybe the fourth one was the former Czech Prime Minister Babiš.
Well, I don't know. I mean, shall we open for more questions, because these polls are pretty kind of, you know, sociologically speaking, a bit quickie, you know, because neither Putin, Orban, nor Xi Jinping run in the elections in Serbia. So, you know, but okay.
True that.
I mean,
some other question, maybe, or also a comment?
Thank you very much. Frauke Sebas, I'm a student at Andras University in Budapest, and I wanted to ask about the recent demographic summit which took place in Budapest, and the way that the government, or that Orban himself as well, has taken this conservatism that, I mean, in a kind of more divided public realm, let's say, across Europe and beyond, of more progressive versus conservative values, this idea of strengthening family politics, something that's very present in the Hungarian sphere, obviously, such as tax cuts for mothers of a certain number of children and stuff. So I was wondering how you see this as something that is potentially gaining ground both in the region but also in the rest of Europe. Thank you.
Do you address this question to some? Or it's just...
Maybe you know, but I don't know. Maybe you can answer.
In Serbia, it's already happening. We have
In Bosnia and Serbia, is it popular, this policy?
Yes, I mean, I know that there are cooperations between the ministries that are in charge for that in Republika Srpska and in Hungary. In a sense, let's copy paste the policies and let's see what is applicable in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska. Whether also some of the investments or supports for farmers, etc., that come directly from Hungary for Republika Srpska, whether they have this element of demography. I really don't know. I haven't looked into the detail whether that's one of the conditions.
Thank you. We can continue with this role.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for a really interesting discussion. I'm Omar Memišević from Bosnia and Herzegovina, a research fellow at Strategic Analysis. Over the years, we had really a large amount of events sponsored by Fidesz or Viktor Orban, where a map of Hungary before the Treaty of Trianon was visible, was present very visibly. And then on the other side, we have, on the other hand, we have the fact that leaders both in Croatia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in Serbia are more and more affiliated with Viktor Orban, whereas on those maps, almost half of Croatia is part of Hungary, or Vojvodina is part of Hungary as well, while those leaders are affiliated with them. So my main question is, how do you comment on that relationship? Why is it happening in that sense? And the second question is, which I forgot. Maybe later, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I skip a lady in the first row, so we can take 2 or 3 questions and then go.
Thank you. Julia Ivan, Amnesty International in the Netherlands, but I'm originally Hungarian, and hence my interest. My question would relate back to the rule of law, blah blah, thingy. Like, are those policies of the Orban regime gaining ground as well? Like, notably, yeah, the denial of such a concept, even if it's very clear from the EU legal body, and also like attacks on the judiciary, the independence of these institutions. Do you see it happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia? And the third element, which I would be curious to hear your comments on, is the relationship with civil society. Like, as a foreign mercenary myself, I'm very interested to hear if you think I have my fellows here in Serbia. Thank you.
And the last question in this round? Yes, we can conclude. You can start from the last.
Yeah, you want to start, because there were questions kind of back and forth. Okay, well, maybe to answer to Omar's question, and connected with Julia's question. So rule of law, blah blah, and Omar, you were asking about these Trianon maps, and maybe you want to comment on it from the point of view of Hungarian internal politics, but this is basically nonsense. It's just symbolical nonsense. What I was telling you about, the reality is that Vojvodina has 30% less Hungarians. You know, that's the reality. And I can even go, because there is this, which you may say, okay, you know, Orban wanted to give citizenship to Vojvodina Hungarians, which is legitimate, you know, but I mean, in Serbia, nobody complained about this. The thing is, the other thing is assimilation. Cultural policies that you do, and not assimilation that you should blame. I'm always blaming the Serbian government. This is absolutely not the fault of the Serbian government. If you move all cultural institutions in the north, if you leave, you know, then there is no longer Uvidek. Uvidek is just Novi Sad. You know, there is, I don't want to name other, Pančevo, Sremska Mitrovica. Hungarians there are just assimilating, and we have data to prove that. Basically, in primary schools in Serbia, there are, I think, 10% less kids, secondary about 14. If you look at Hungarians in Hungarian language schools, It's the drop, there is 40% less in the last 15 years. Serbian figures were also for 15 years. And then you compare Hungarian minority kids going to Serbian schools and taking Hungarian classes as, kind of a second language, that doubled. So that shows you this assimilation. So I think this is the result purely, so Orban may have greater Hungary on his scarf, but this is for internal political consumption. Reality is this, in Vojvodina, and maybe to connect to rule of law, blah, blah, hold this story. This citizenship law basically is an extraordinary voting machine for Fidesz. Fidesz, I think, had about 270,000 votes from diaspora of Hungarians living in historical Hungary. This Hungary on the scarf, of the football scarf. Yes, and 94. So, and the reality in Serbia is, because what happens? If you're a Hungarian from Hungary, you have a permanent address in Hungary, and say you go and live in, I don't know, Ireland or something, you have to go back to Hungary to vote, or you can go to the diplomatic representations to vote. If you're a Hungarian living in historical Hungarian lands, then you get to vote by mail. And what happens in Vojvodina? Hungarian Electoral Commission gives the ballots to the Hungarian Postal Service, Hungarian Postal Service to the Serbian Postal Service, and Serbian Postal Service to Fidesz-affiliated NGO that then distributes these votes for the voters. Sometimes, when investigative journalists wrote about that, they vote themselves for them,
democracy at its finest.
Yes, so this is the rule of law, blah, blah, in the foreign policy,
Maybe we can finish up with the answers of the question and maybe some final points.
Yes,
so.
I will be very, very quick. I would say, No. I would say when it comes to the rule of law, blah, 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 I think that the biggest success of Viktor Orban and the government in Budapest was to get the Commissioner for EU Enlargement, because the Commissioner for EU Enlargement is actually, his service is in charge for looking into what's happening in the countries that are part of the enlargement process, to recognize in the reports, annual reports, how far they've come when it comes to the preparedness for the EU membership. And just yesterday we had and it's interesting. I think someone should really do a research and a paper on Varhelyi in the European Commission and how far he managed to capture or not to capture, in fact, the institution. But yesterday he met with EU minister here in Belgrade, Tanja Miščević, and he then tweeted after the meeting with her, "I encourage Serbia to continue to show its dedication to deliver on outstanding rule of law issues and to ensure implementation of recent laws." But if you look at the European Commission reports, which very few people do, ESI, European Stability Initiative, where I work, we do look at the reports, you will see that European Commission for all countries does for 33 chapters, and for rule of law even has sub-chapters in which it ranks countries how prepared they are for the EU membership, whether they're at the beginning, whether they're at what stage they are, or they're well prepared for the EU membership. And in fact, if you look at those assessments since 2015, Serbia hasn't moved a single inch when it comes to the level of preparedness, hasn't improved while negotiating for EU membership, which shows you a complete discrepancy between what the experts and people working and reporting and delivering reports, some here know how difficult these reports is to produce them, and how he simply scraps them to the floor with one tweet, which is now obviously in every major media outlet in Serbia as a signal that Serbia is on the right path. When it comes to the borders, and with that I continue, some of you know in 2018, 2019, I was obsessed with border changes, or fighting against the border changes. So I had an opportunity in one of the similar meetings like this to ask an MP from Fidesz party, do you support the partition of Kosovo? How do you see the idea of, exchanging territories between Serbia and Kosovo, which were very, very present in 2018, 2019? And his response was, listen. And I said, and how does that have impact on Hungary? Because we know exactly similar to what your question was. And he said, listen, we know we're part of the NATO, we're part of the EU. Once you're in there, it's very difficult to change the borders, or it's practically impossible. But while you're outside of the EU and NATO, there are some possibilities. So who are we to discourage countries who have some interests and wishes and are not part of the NATO and part of the EU to pursue? Of course, that was an MP of Fidesz, and it doesn't mean that it's an official Hungarian policy, but I think it tells you a lot about what the actual feeling and sense towards the borders Hungarian Fidesz party has, and I think it also shows how in its essence what we get from Budapest is at the same time potentially very dangerous.
It's a pity.
Thank you. Only two short remarks on the map. As you know, Mr. Orban is a realist. He knows exactly that he cannot change the border, and even he's not striving to change the borders, but he's playing the card, because in his electorate and constituency, there are many who hope for that. The illusionist, if you ask them really that you think that it's realistic to change, they say no. But they like to see that. And this map, it's a famous map. It's a historical map. It's not a new thing. It's 150 years old thing. It's hanging there. But it's not by chance that it is hanging behind him in his studio, because it can play this card and for domestic policy. Only for domestic policy, it's not for everything. My second remark on the ballots among the ethnic Hungarians surrounding in Hungary, unfortunately, it is a very intransparent process, and no one can really control how is it working. And there are many, many fraudulent things behind it. The only good element that it doesn't matter so much, it more or less at maximum two, but minimum one seat in the parliament can be changed by that. But no one is able to really control that, because that's the process that you mentioned, that the ethnic Hungarian parties or organizations are collecting the things, and where can change that, no one knows. Of course, we cannot substantiate that it has been changed, but it could be. No one could really control that. Thank
you. Just a final remark. Maps are, I agree, for domestic use only, although Orban should know how sensitive this topic is to our neighbors, especially Croatia, but especially for Romania. And when it comes to Ali, what you said about Commissioner Várhely's tweet yesterday, his hands are not clean at all, but I do think that yesterday's tweet has nothing to do with, let's say, Hungary's positions in Bosnia or Hungary's position towards Serbia. It is rather about, let's say, these communications faux pas, which are very common in the European Commission between von der Leyen and the commissioners, and also between von der Leyen and Michel, when it comes to, for example, the 2013 announcement. And also it has more to do with the appeasement policy of the EU towards Serbia, rather than anything to do with Várhelyi and his ties to Budapest and Orban.
Thank you very much for this open discussion. That was open discussion. Good.